That's right, folks. The next move is a vaccine. We've had the fake pandemic. We've had violence in the streets. They're going to pull these two things together. And the end game for this mask mania is a forced vaccine. And no, they're not going to send the cops to your house to force you to have a vaccine. What they have planned is much more sinister, much more sinister. It's basically a siege. What they're going to do is they're going to starve you out. They're going to say, all right, you're going to stay in your house. You're not going to have a job. You're not going to go to school. You're not going to travel. You're not going to be able to go to the store to get groceries unless you've got your immunity passport. We'll just keep you there. And we're going to do this in a regulatory way. And we're going to use our corporations to push this because, as they've already talked about, openly talked about this, as they're putting their plans out in the open, saying, do not make this a law. Do not make this a crime to not get a vaccine. We have to do this because if we do that, that's going to invite legal challenges. And we want to stop due process. I read that to you last week. We don't want to have any due process challenges to this. We don't want to make this a crime. We want to make this a regulation. And this is the way these people have been taking our freedom for decades. I've constantly talked about this. Rand Paul talks about this. Rand Paul and a couple of people in the Congress, Rand Paul in the Senate, a couple of people in the Congress, every year introduce what he's been calling the REINS Act, as in, rein them in. But they've been reigning over us like kings and queens. But no, we need to rein them in. We need to say, we need to stop creating regulations that then we say, well, if you violate the regulation, it's not a law. So you don't get any due process. You don't get any presumption of innocence. You don't get any protection against excessive fines. We have these bureaucracies that come up with regulations, these unelected people that you can't get out. So now we don't only have taxation without representation, we have regulation without representation. And there's no accountability to these people, for these people. No accountability to you. And this is what they're planning to use to push out the vaccines. That and the public-private partnership with these communists. And this is really the true thing, folks. We have to understand this revolution is not just a communist revolution. It is a communist plus corporation revolution. Corporate communists. Corporate communists. Let me repeat that again. It's the corporate communists. If you don't know what that looks like, look at Silicon Valley. These are the people who are allied, the elitists who are allied, pushing a globalist orientation here. But I think a better description is the corporate communists. The big banks have always pushed communism. The multinational corporations have always pushed communism. Go back and look at Arm and Hammer. Look at who funded Lenin to start the communist revolution. Look at who put communist China in charge. Look how they set up communist China. Communist China is not communist anymore. Communist China is fascist. There's a merger of government and corporation, and that's what we have here in America. But let's call it the corporate communist revolution. Going back to the masks, however, there's a great article from offguardian.org written by Michael Lesher. Media mask mania, or COVID-19 groupthink. He said, I never thought I'd see the day when publicly wearing a muzzle would constitute proof of virtue in the same country whose government less than 20 years ago rationalized the bloody invasion of Afghanistan as a way of saving women from veiling their face. And I think he's onto something here. I've called it the Fauci burqa. I've called it that many times. And this is basically what he's talking about, the Fauci burqa. Is it any wonder, since there is no medical reason for you to wear a cloth mask, why do you think they're demanding it here? It is a sign of submission as surely as the Islamic burqa is a sign of submission. I think this works in many different ways. But the key thing is the narrative that they keep telling you. You don't wear a mask to protect yourself. You wear a mask to protect other people. Where have we heard this nonsense before? We've heard it with vaccines. Don't tell me that any medical procedure or tactic or regulation or whatever Doesn't protect me, but it protects you if I do it. That's garbage, nonsense, absolute nonsense. How do you embrace that kind of Orwellian doublethink? Well, that is precisely what is being used for both of these. He says, but then I never thought I would hear American liberals proudly denounce supporters of the U.S. Constitution as a death cult, nor that I'd actually start to find Donald Trump sounding almost reasonable. And, yeah, he is reasonable when it comes to masks. Let's hope that he holds still on that. But don't forget about the fact that Trump is pushing the vaccine. And that is the end game. And whether Trump wins or Biden wins, I think you're going to see this push on the vaccines very, very hard. For all the talk about freedom and liberty, understand they don't believe that. Nobody in either party leadership believes that. Nobody believes that. That is a game that they play with you. And keep your eye on the vaccine. That's the real issue here. The mask is simply preparation. That's why I say this is the hill to die on. Last week, I went to the dentist for a procedure that I'd already prepaid for. And they didn't want to let me in because I wouldn't wear a mask. I said, I'm going in here 20 feet to the chair in a dentist's office where I'm not going to be wearing a mask the whole time. And I'd been there before after this crazy stuff began. And I said, I'm not wearing a mask. And eventually they let me in. But they, as this receptionist is arguing with me, they have another office worker come out carrying a bunch of boxes, and she's not wearing a mask. I said, she's not wearing a mask. Can you tell me I can't walk in here and go 20 feet to the dental chair and then take off my mask? It's the same thing that happened to me at that restaurant a couple of weeks ago. My wife and I went to a restaurant. We walked in. This is after Hey Abbott had done his statewide mask mandates. And so we walk in, and the entire restaurant, and the way the thing was set, it's a small restaurant, small independent restaurant. I was trying to support them. No longer. Anyway, we walk in, and they had picnic benches where people sat. And, it's common at this particular restaurant where you would have multiple families sitting at one table, and they still were doing it. There's a little bit of a gap between different groups. So, that these are people who are not part of the same party. And all the picnic tables were lined up down the side and all the way up to the front door. Everybody that was seated without a mask. None of the diners were wearing a mask. You can't eat with a mask on. But as soon as you sit down, you're able to take your mask off while you're waiting for them to bring you the menu. And then you can look at the menu with your mask off. You can order with your mask off. You can wait for the food with your mask off. You can eat with your mask off, and you can wait for the check to come, the bill to come, with your mask off. And so we walk in, and the empty table is 5 feet away from us, and she refuses to serve us because we don't have a mask. I said, none of these people are wearing masks. What is the matter with you? I mean, this is not about anything that's medical. If you've got a room full of people without a mask and you're demanding that I wear a mask, it's just a sign of compliance and submission. This is about politics. This is about control. There's nothing scientific about it except for the psychological aspect of this. That's highly scientific. Highly scientific. And I said, I refuse, and you'll never see me again. Hope you go out of business because you are selling the rope that is going to be used to hang you. This small business owner doesn't realize that the very fear and paranoia and compliance that she is selling out there is what is ultimately going to finally destroy her business. Lenin was right about that. These people do understand human nature better than we do in many cases. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Here's what Jonathan Turley has to say. He says, all right, as this is ramping up, just like USA Today is pushing this, constantly pushing it further and further. He says there's a new form of protests that are sweeping across the country as individuals put on an anti-mask mask to defy the mandatory mask rules of the communist corporations because they're pushing it more than the governors are. Walmart, in 65% of their stores, there is no government mandate for masks, but Walmart is putting it there. And the National Retail Federation is doing that as well. So the anti-masks are made out of thin material, out of mesh, or even crochet. They're advertised as having no protective qualities for COVID-19. The question is whether or not they're legal. They appear to be so. And, quite frankly, look, Paul Joseph Watson has a story out of the UK, and he shows the packaging on a standard set of cloth masks that are being sold. Now, they're demanding that you wear the cloth mask. Why? Because of safety, right? Except the packaging on the mask itself says this. This product is an ear loop mask. This product is not a respirator and will not provide any protection against COVID-19 or any other virus or contaminant. That's on the package. But that is being mandated by retailers, mandated by government because of your safety. This is not about medicine. It's not about science, and it's not about safety. It's about control. And so when we look at that, is it really that much of a stretch to say, okay, well, if they're going to mandate cloth masks that the manufacturers say doesn't work, and of course they ignore, when they use PCR tests, they ignore the person who made the test. The Nobel Prize-winning scientist who created the PCR test said you can't use that to test for coronavirus, but they're using that. And then they're mandating that you wear masks. This has nothing to do with facts or science. But he says a popular video shows a man wearing a mesh mask going into a Tampa Walmart and saying, quote, "It was almost like not wearing a mask at all, and nobody cared because it's not about safety. It's about compliance." And so he takes a look at some of the laws, like in Alabama. There he is right there. He doesn't even try to hide it. I mean, it's like a big open mesh. And again, nobody cares. But they would ram their cart into your cart. You would be confronted by the black shirts at Walmart that they're setting up specifically for this. You would be confronted by these people if you didn't have on that mesh mask. They'd be shooting you birds, they'd be calling the police on you, but you walk in with a mesh mask, hey, that's fine. And the reality is that mesh mask is just as effective as the cloth masks because, as has been pointed out many times, thinking that these masks are going to stop a coronavirus is like thinking you're going to keep mosquitoes out with a hurricane chain link fence. Most laws, like Alabama's, only refer to covering, not a mask with any protective qualities. For example, effective July 16th, 2020, says Maryland, each person shall wear a mask or other facial covering that covers his or her nostrils and mouth at all time when within 6 feet of a person from another household, and on and on. But consider the definition of a face covering. Face covering means a covering that fully covers a person's nose and mouth, but is not, I repeat, is not a medical grade mask. The term face covering includes, without limitation, scarves and bandanas, which we always had, which Fauci said we had to save for the heroes. No. He was saving this for the second phase of the lockdown. We'll be right back.
Where the hell did this water come from? Where did it come from?
InfoWarsStore.com. We can't survive without pure, clean drinking water. So make sure that it's always available to you with the Alexa Pure water filtration system. This gravity-fed system filters through all the toxins and gets straight to clean, healthy, great-tasting water. Yummy in my tummy. Bring the purest, most refreshing water to your home by ordering the Alexa Pure water filtration system today from InfoWarsStore.com. InfoWarsStore.com. Other systems just don't compare.